Hello, hello. Welcome. Good morning. I hope everyone is doing great. Hello, Ray. How are you today?
Exceptionally well.
Exceptionally well. I love hearing that. So, hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Leading in a Crisis Virtual Summit, Actionable Business and HR Strategies for Navigating Crisis and Change. Today, I am pleased to have with us Mr. Ray Weaver, Senior Executive Coach and Master Trainer and 30-year Air Force veteran. For his special talk on engaging in productive conflict to shift your culture. I had to ask Ray to come back because his take on emotional intelligence and conflict management is just second to none. So thank you, Ray, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here. What I'm going to do, if you can give me just one moment, I see a lot of glare. So I just need to get off camera for a minute, adjust my room, and I'll be right back. Is that okay?
Sounds like a plan. I'm going to introduce our sponsors.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. While Ray is getting situated, I am going to introduce our sponsors. And we're going to try the captions this time. So you guys let me know if we like that. So I want to say thank you to the Whitmarsh Consulting Group. David Whitmarsh and his team of multi-channel marketing experts have really pulled out the stops to help us pull the Leading in a Crisis Summit off. They are exceptionally talented and strategically minded, and they're helping some of our clients pivot their marketing strategies given the circumstance. So do reach out to David, let him know that I made the recommendation. Also want to say thank you to Insperity, HR that makes a difference. If you've been on any of the webinars, you know that I'm a big fan of Insperity. When I reached out and said, what do you think about sponsoring? They said, absolutely. What can I do to help? And then our business performance advisor, I reached back out to him and I said, well, what do you think about giving something away for free, something of value to our participants? And he thought about it for a minute and said, well, how about a free HR financial analysis report and debrief? And I had to ask what that was because I really didn't understand it initially. I didn't know it was going to be such a big deal, but it ends up being somewhere between a 3 and a 10-hour process, mostly on the business performance advisor's shoulders. They'll ask for your HR budget, the one you prepared, you spent a lot of time preparing before 2020. And they'll compare it to what other organizations of similar shape, scope, size have done and in similar situations, and provide just some context around here's where you might be able to save some money, here's what other organizations are doing to be effective and successful, and just support you in doing the HR budget pivot that so many of us are having to do. If that's going to be supportive, don't hesitate to reach out. They know that not everyone that takes advantage of this freebie is going to be a good fit for them as a client, and they're still offering it as their gift. It's turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/HR report. And our final sponsor, before we get started in our topic about productive conflict, is our internal team of strategic planning experts and management consultants. They put together a data-driven crisis strategy. So it's really strategic planning with an ear and an eye for, all of us are going to have to change. This new normal isn't going to become normal for a long time, perhaps. And so many businesses are in that place of pivoting, shifting, changing their entire trajectory in some cases. And our data-driven process can really support making that as efficient and as effective as possible. So reach out if we may be of service. It would be my honor to share a little bit more about that and to learn about your organization. My name, Anissa Avon. I am the founder and CEO of TurnKey Coaching and Development Solutions. We are a single source enterprise learning and development provider, providing executive coaching and outplacement services and leadership development and employee development and frontline manager development. But what I am most proud of is right now is our team of experts and thought leaders that have volunteered to share their knowledge with us in our Leading in a Crisis Summit, originally planned for April and May of 2020. Now we're going to go ahead and go on into June. By request, we have 50 plus speakers and counting. So go on back to that site and check out the new speakers, select one or all, and let us know what topics were worth your time and what topics you'd like to have us reach out and provide to you guys. So I want to introduce Ray. Ray Weaver is the CEO of TurnKey Coaching and Consulting. He is an executive coach, a management consulting, and a master trainer, with his specialties being team development and productive conflict, which we're going to hear about. He is a 30-year Air Force veteran, and Ray, I'm going to try to remember this. You served Command Chief Master Sergeant. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Ah, I knew it. Okay, pat myself right there. I did it. Ray is also a certified PCC, professional certified coach with the International Coach Federation. And this is the most beautiful part. He is married to his best friend for 37 years. They have 2 adult sons, a loving daughter-in-law, and about to be a grandpa. So congratulations, Ray.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about you and what we're going to learn today.
Well, a little bit about me is that what I found is, for me to be more effective in life, I've had to learn to deal with conflict, especially after the conflict of leaving a career for 30 years and then moving into serving other areas in the community. And I realized that in some ways I was conflict averse. And what I realized is that much of that conflict is because of how I was perceiving it in my mind, and not really giving in and willing to show up, even though the situations are tough. And so in that, what I found out about conflict too, as I sat down and I think about it, there is no change without conflict. That whenever you're making a change, or whenever you're making a transition, that it will be some conflict. And so when I really thought about it too, even in this season, this time, much of the conflict that I'm having is I'm trying to get back, not so much to a new normal, but adjust my rhythm to this new season.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Adjust your rhythm to the new season.
Yeah.
That also makes this challenge mentally a little more bearable.
Yes, yes. And so that's where we're, and so much of that is, I have always of doing things, always of saying, there was times I said, oh, I can't do that, I can't do this, but I'm realizing that now in this new season, there are certain things where I thought I couldn't do that I can do now. And I used to be on the road a lot for 80 to 100 days a year, doing a lot of in-person facilitation and kind of classroom work and delivering all kind of content. And I had to stop and realize that, hey, in this new season, that may not be what's needed right now, as we have more and more people working from home, especially with our HR partners, especially in a lot of people who are in, I do a lot of work with governments, and now they're realizing that, hey, wait a minute, there may be a cost savings now to allowing people to work from home, and also being able to deliver training as needed when they need it. So it allowed me now to kind of have to stop and say, okay, how would I do this? How would I show up? How would I understand? And I'm a digital immigrant. So I'm having to relearn platforms, understanding, Zoom. A couple months ago, a lot of us wouldn't have understood Zoom and Mentimeter and cloud-based training, interactive training programs. And so those are all the things now that I'm having to learn. And there's a learning curve, so there's some conflict there. But at the same time, it's opening up a new opportunity and a new life that I never thought could happen. But it's still some conflict because I'm just trying to get into the new rhythm of how I need to be. So,
well, and that is the entire focus of today, is about a frame around conflict as how to make it productive in your relationships. And what you're sharing is in our relationship with ourselves as well as with others.
Yes, correct, right, spot on. Yes.
I'm eager to learn.
All right. So as we go through, and I'm going to start sharing my screen here with you.
Yes, sir.
Let me go ahead and click. host disabled participant screen. Okay. Let's see how we can do this. And let's see if I can get something going here. And I think did you allow me to share the screen?
Yes, it should allow you. Do you see a green button at the bottom? Share screen? If you hover over the bottom of the Zoom, you should see a share screen. Is it coming up for you?
Yeah, see it? And it says.
Okay, good. Then I won't blame your digital immigration status.
Okay. It says host disabled participant screen share.
Well, now that's just rude. Let me see. Okay. Well, no, it looks like only hosts. All panelists, look. Who can start sharing? All planet. Okay, now see if you can share your screen.
Hey, there we go.
Hey. Look who was having digital issues. Me.
So let's see if we get going here.
Perfect.
That's what I was looking for. There we go. So now it allows me to do that. So
awesome.
With that, I just want to, when we talk about conflict, just in the box, if you could, in the chat box, go ahead and what's the first words that come to mind when you think about conflict? Give you a chance to do that. And just let me know what's coming up out there.
I'm going to read the chat box. I've got yuck.
Yeah.
I am very conflict averse. Anxiety.
Yes.
Sick stomach.
Yes.
Avoid it. Nerves. Run away. Bring it.
Bring it. I love that.
That's what my honey would say. Bring it.
Bring it. All right. Thank you so much for participating out there. So in that, here's the thing I want you to understand about conflict. It actually costs, the cost of workplace conflict is 25 to 40% of managers' time is spent dealing with conflict. And if you think about it, that's 1 to 2 days of work week. So in that, we have to learn to embrace conflict and be able to successfully work our way through it because it's just there. And conflict can show up in any way. And so let me just share with you, sometimes when we think conflict, people think we're talking about a personal fight. And actually, conflict's actually just a difference in ideology, where I'm thinking we should go this way, and you're thinking we should go that way. And now we have this conflict of a situation where now what do we do with it? And so in that, we have to be able to be aware of what's going on. Also in that too, we're talking about what it costs workplace, and this is based on entrepreneur.com. In the workplace, it costs almost $359 billion annually that it costs for conflict. So when you can't effectively work through conflict, it costs you. It slows down your work. It slows down your productivity. But what we find is teams that can productively work through conflict become better, and they make better decisions together. And also it brings in closer relationships, as we say, when you go through the fire, you tend to have a better relationship. So I just want you to think about that, the cost of our unwillingness sometime to face the conflicts.
I had no idea. That is a big number.
That's a big number, yes. So when we're going to be talking about this productive conflict, I know, notice I'm saying productive conflict because there are some behaviors that make it destructive. But what we're going to be talking about productive conflict, but also I'm going to show you some possibly destructive behaviors that is making that $3 billion cost go up. But what we're going to try to talk about is productive conflict, because I want you to see conflict is necessary. And if you think about it, even in your own life, to get to where you're at, there were some obstacles and barriers you had to overcome. And once you go through those and you can learn from that experience, the next time you face that experience, there's not as much anxiety that is about it. And as you grow and you develop, you learn to pick up on signals. You learn to master your own stories. You learn to pay attention to the emotions that you have, so you can kind of interrupt your stories so that you can effectively process through that and make it as productive as we can. So as we keep going, I'm going to just shoot on some more here.
Great.
How are we so far out there? We're
doing good.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm going to show you is I want you to just think about a conflict on this is, most of you may have seen it, but if not, this is what we call the Thomas Kilmann conflict resolution model. And in that, there's 5 conflict handling modes. There's competing, there's collaboration, there's compromising, there's avoiding, and there's accommodating. But what I want you to look is first look on the left-hand side of that scale. That's about assertiveness. So if you notice, I have a little thing in brackets, what that's about is the importance of the outcome. So I want you to be thinking about this, the importance of the outcome or the importance of the task. And then from that, there's high to low. Then if you look at the bottom, you'll see cooperativeness. And another name for cooperativeness is about the relationship. So that goes from low to high. So I want you to think about this when we're talking about conflict. What if we shift our perspective and ask ourselves, okay, are we trying, if the importance of this thing I'm trying to get done is important, then is important, but it's not as so much I'm worried about the relationship right now, I just need to get this done, then I may want to shift to competing. And people say, what does that sound like? What does that look like? And I want you to consider this. When we're talking about competing, we're talking about when you're like standing up for your rights, defending a position you believe to be correct, or sometimes it's simply trying to win. And so in that one, when you're always just simply trying to win, competing may not be the right conflict resolution strategy. So in that, I want you to start thinking about, what am I trying to do for the outcome, and what am I trying to do for the relationship? Now, if we take a good look and we look to the far right, notice collaboration is high in making the outcome to be right, and also high in relationship. So in that, what you're doing when we're talking collaboration, you're actually you're creating a win-win. And I just want you to be aware of collaboration, it takes a long time. And you say, but what does that look like? And what that looks like, maybe exploring a disagreement to learn from each other's insights. It may look like resolving some condition that would otherwise have the team compete for resources, or confirming or trying to find a creative solution to an interpersonal problem. And notice that takes time. So I want you to be thinking about how we had to respond in this pandemic. For some of you, you had just to compete because we just had to get things done. And that is what's needed. So much of that, and I want you to think about, there are certain values and certain rules you have in your organizations that you will not compromise on. Yep. You know, there are certain policies about EEO policies, all those kind of things that you just don't compromise on. So in that, that's a competing strategy of, hey, no. There's a competing strategy even sometime with our kids. Oh, you will eat your broccoli, or you will eat your vegetables. we're not going to have a conversation about that. Or you will be on time. Or there are certain things that you've set up even in your own home that you compete with, because this is just, we need these kind of rules to create this healthy structure. So we have those in that, and we may need to compete. So in that, I want you to be thinking about it. Sometime that could really help us, allow us to deal with conflict if we stop and we look at the modes and we go, what's needed from me now? In this situation, is it important I get the task done right away? Or is it task, if it's both getting the task done and a relationship, I may need to be a little bit more collaborative. So as we move down, notice we talk about compromising. We midpoint on outcome, we midpoint on relationship. And we tend to compromise sometime. And what compromise look like? Splitting the difference, engaging in concessions, and seeking a quick middle ground position. And I want you to be thinking about this. How many of you ever bought a car? You walk in, and the sales rep is starting off competing, and you start off competing. This is what I'm going to pay for it. And they're going, this is what we're offering. But eventually you get down to compromise.
Yeah.
And so in that we can, and if it really works out, we can both collaborate, then that's good. But a lot of times we end up compromising. But also in the workplace, sometimes we do that. And so even in our home life and all those kind of things. And it may be necessary where we're getting some of the things done we want, but at the same time, we're balancing the relationship. So as we move down, let's take a look at avoiding. And people say, well, you should never avoid for conflict resolution. You don't avoid. Well, there are certain times that we need to avoid. And that's a good conflict resolution strategy. So some of you out there that say you avoid, I applaud you. That's a good strategy sometimes. It may not be all the time, but sometimes that's a good strategy. And there are times we just need to avoid things. And notice when we're avoiding, We're not worried about getting the outcome done, and we're not really worried about the relationships. And what that may look like is, say that you're diplomatically sidestepping an issue, postponing an issue until a better time, or simply withdrawing from a threatening situation. Those are all good times to consider that in the conflict resolution model of I need to avoid. And finally, let's just move over to accommodating. And we want to think about that. In accommodating, it's more about the relationship than it is about getting something done. So I just accommodate. And that may look like selfish generosity or charity, obeying another person's order when you would prefer not to, or yielding to another's point of view. And there are times we just yield to that point of view and we accommodate it. And I jokingly sometimes think about accommodating, and I want you to think about in the good old days about 60 days ago when we all go out to dinner on a Friday. Have you ever had that conversation with your significant other? Like you get in the car and you go, where do you want to eat? Oh, where do
you want to go?
Where do you want to go?
And if you're my honey, he'll say, you get to choose. And then I choose. And he'll be like, I don't want to go there. And then I choose somewhere else. Oh, I'm like, yeah. So I will accommodate.
I will accommodate. So we do that. And so in that, what I want you to be aware of is that when you say that maybe to shift your productive conflict, to make conflict productive, start asking yourself, hey, what is really my intent here? Is it, do I want to have a high getting the outcome I want, and at the same time high on the relationship? I need to be collaborative.
Yes.
But if it's something that's really not important to me and it's not, I may need to avoid, or I may need to accommodate.
Okay.
But there are certain times I just need to compete because it's what's necessary and needed. And by using this model, these modes of conflict, it can allow you to say, okay, adjust, and allow your body and your emotions to adjust and saying, hey, this is what's needed. This is the right thing to do.
So you just said something that I want to ask you a question about.
Yes.
Using this model and basically being mindful about what is my intent.
Yes.
What is it I want here?
Yes.
A person can use this model to intentionally navigate around basically the conflict options and be more agile to get what it is that's the best for any given situation.
Yes, that's correct. You're spot on. So in that too, if you think about it, sometimes you may want to be collaborative, but you may have to work through all these to get there. And so in that, we have to be aware is that we don't, when we're talking about conflict or being in conflict, it isn't that we just need to use one mode. There may be a situation where you have to use multiple modes. And you think about, let's say in the sense of great relationships, there are times that we compete, we have boundaries, and another name for competing is I have boundaries. So there are certain boundaries you're not going to cross. And so in that, this is my values and my boundaries. I'm going to say, hey, I'm sorry. This is just the way it's got to be.
Yeah.
And there are times that we're still working over a long time to be collaborative, but along that long process we're going in businesses, in workplaces, there's going to be some accommodating. There's going to be avoiding or be compromising. And notice we've been very accommodating in this season. We've been very accommodating for allowing people to work from home, allowing them maybe to, they because of their home situation, they may be better at getting things done in the middle of the night than they were doing the standard business hours of 9 to 5. And we're being very accommodating right now that we were telling ourselves before we were competing and go, this is just the way it has to be. Well, we're starting to realize, wait a minute, certain things that we set up and we said, wait a minute, now as I'm looking at it, that maybe not be important. So I realize right now what's maybe needed more is about relationships. So I'm being accommodating.
Mm-hmm. So you will probably get to this in a moment, but because we're talking about changing the culture, and right now culture is in flux for most organizations. And there's a lot of anxiety and fear and doubts and uncertainty and all of that. My real question is about the leaders who are really effective at leading their organizations right now.
Yes.
How are they, how do they adapt? As a general rule, effective leaders, what is it that they do, whether they know they're doing this or not, that's more effective than ineffective?
What's more effective than ineffective is that they interrupt their stories. And we'll be getting to that.
Okay, knew it.
They're being very present, they're being very aware, and what they don't allow their automatic thoughts to run forward. So what you'll find is you used a word that gave you the answer. Yeah. And it was they're being intentional.
Okay. Yep.
And that's the thing, is what you're seeing is the leaders who are out there really being effective in the season, they're being intentional, including in what the words that they use.
Yes.
And how they show up. So because what they realize is that in these crisis situations, you have to get out of automatic and you have to stop, and you have to understand what is needed from me now and how do I need to deliver it to get the intent of what I'm trying to say. So you have to be very careful with your words. You have to be very careful with what you're putting out there. You have to be very careful of how you're allowing people to be collaborative, where you're not creating more fight between organizations or creating a atmosphere of uncertainty by the way you're showing up and presenting yourself.
Very good.
So the word is they're being intentional. So what they're doing is they're not being automatic. And so we'll be getting to that. So it's all moving on. So in that's what we're talking about. You're talking about destructive responses. And here's what happens. Conflict happens and we have an automatic thought. And then we have a destructive response. And people say, what do you mean by automatic thought? And I'll just, some of these, and here's some things I want you to be thinking about. Much of the time, because of our neuroscience and how we're made up, our brain is always looking for threats. So it will always look for threats, and it looks for threats in a bigger way than it does for reward. So threat to reward ratio in our brain is we're always looking for threats. And if you think about even in businesses, most managers and most leaders, they're always going to find out what's wrong.
Yeah.
What we got to fix. And so they're looking for all the threats and all those things. And it's just part of who we are in the way we think, but we don't stop and see the reward. So much of that is because we're on automatic. So what happens is conflict happens, we have an automatic thought, and then we have a destructive response. So let me step back here a little bit. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to go back here. Now I have to
reverse.
Yeah, reverse. There we go. Previous. There we go. All right. So in that, I want you to be thinking of a destructive response. And the reason I asked you when you think of conflict earlier, notice what your response was. Yuck. Yeah. I hate it. And then someone said, bring it on.
Uh-huh.
In that, a lot of times where it is, that's your automatic thought through it. So in that automatic thought may be fear. Some of that automatic thought is, okay, they're trying to attack me. Some of that automatic thought may be they're trying to make me look bad. Some of that automatic thought may be, okay, I'm going to be very sarcastic here. Some of that, so there's some very destructive responses from these automatic thoughts, and it'll run you to the point where it may be some experiences that you've had in your past that you're responding to that has nothing to do with this issue. And much of our automatic thoughts are, we're not responding to the situation that's before us. We're actually responding to the story that we tell ourselves. And we've just built up some automatic thoughts. And I don't know if I saw something come up on the chat box there. I don't know if somebody had a question or something.
Is looking for the threat versus reward just a natural human tendency?
Yes, that's a natural human tendency. And so much of that's why you see leaders, you have a lot of leaders as they move up, they get coaching and a lot of other things because they have someone that's asking certain kind of questions to get out of their automatic way of thinking, because their automatic way of thinking, their thought may be the barrier to them being more effective, because just how we perceive the world. And you have some out there who perceive the world as in a mindset of that that I need to fear uncertainty. And then there are some who have the growth mindset who accept uncertainty. So notice the difference. One fears it and one accepts it. So if I fear it, I'm going to limit myself. But if I accept it and go, okay, there is some uncertainty out there, but I can use some of my past experiences to help me process through as I learn what's required of the new rhythm. Okay. So it requires you to interrupt your automatic thought. And how we do that is when we have conflict, and then we have automatic thought. But what we need to be aware of is how does it show up to us? What is our bodies trying to tell us? What is our emotions trying to tell us, so that we can step back from it and reframe it so that we can respond in a productive way. So some of those things that say to step back techniques, it may be as simply as taking a breath. It may be as simply as stepping away to gain your composure. And notice, if we go back to the conflict model, that may be, hey, we need to kind of avoid a little bit. We may not just need to just say anything right now. Let me stop, get my senses straight, and then I can go forward. And then it's on reflecting on what you really want. And you mentioned that earlier about what do you really want? That conflict's about what do I really want? So notice, maybe even before you're going, if you know you're going to have a conversation, to help you be intentional to possibly reduce the conflict, is you got to be asking yourself, reflecting on what you really want for you, what you want for others, and what you want for the relationships. And then as we move over to response, notice it's about now adjust your behavior to support getting what you want. Mm-hmm. And that's when you're asking about leaders who are being intentional. And that's what effective leaders are doing. Before they get into that situation, they're kind of thinking through it. What do I want for me here? What do I want for others? What do I want for the relationships? Now, how do I need to behave that will lessen the conflict, the internal conflict, that people won't see this as a threat, that they could start seeing the reward in this? Then they also, now they go forward, they model the way. And then they're constantly could ask themselves questions to get some more clarity. How much of my response is about winning? Am I listening to understand? Am I listening to respond? Mm-hmm. What are the actual reasons my emotions are so tense right now? What am I scared of hearing from this person? Is this a fair discussion? Am I being logical, objective, and respectful? So notice those questions, there's a lot of how and what questions that get you into your thinking. Yep. And what that does, it now takes you out of that fear, flight, or flee, fight, or freeze mode, because now you're thinking through things. And as you start thinking, you start breathing. And now you can respond productively instead of just react
automatically.
Mm-hmm.
These are really good questions. And I don't know if you have the answer for this, but it would seem to me like, especially right now when things are moving so quickly and we have so many decisions to make and we have team members that we really need on board with certain parameters and, policies. What kind of effort does it take for someone to get into a space where this that their automatic is more intentional, that they are more mindful about asking these questions?
Well, some of the things that I help leaders consider to help them better work through conflict is take a look at their routines. There are certain habits that usually a lot of successful leaders have. They have a lot of routines in the sense of they may eat the right things. They get their rest. They take time out to journal and to reflect daily. And also they breathe. Thank you for breathing on this. So you just example. And they breathe. And so part of that is starting to look, because we're trying to get into a new rhythm. So I want you to think about it. If you're used to being a sprinter, and they all of a sudden put you in a 400-meter or 800-meter race, you have to run differently because it requires you to breathe different. It requires you to conserve energy. To be a long distance runner is totally different than being a sprinter. It takes a whole kind of different training. And I'll show you, for instance, too, I don't know if anyone's, just some of the people who've probably been binging on TV a little bit. Some people have been watching The Last Dance. And there was a time in there where Michael Jordan had to train his body to be a baseball player.
Mm-hmm.
It took a whole lot of different exercises. It took a lot of different things. Then it took a different way he had to train his body and prepare to be a basketball player. And what he realized when he actually came back in the mid-season, doing one of the season coming out of baseball, he realized that he wasn't in the right shape to play basketball. So in the end, when the stress was the hardest and it was time, he just wore out. So part of that too is, are you doing the things, fueling yourself correctly? Are you getting the rest and recovery that you need? But also, are you taking in the right things? So much of this too is, do you have a process of learning different things, a reading program, article program? What books are you putting in? What things are you looking at? And also, what are you listening to? There are times that you can't just keep listening to just certain media input, because after a while, it'll just confuse your mind. Yes. So much of that is you have to kind of create a framework and a culture in your own for your own recovery, so you can be at your best.
Agreed. Very good.
Yes. So as we keep moving here, so just a few takeaways here is that understand conflict is a part of life and growth. There is no growth without conflict. Again, without conflict, there is no change. And when we're talking about culture and organizations, healthy organizations have a culture that embrace productive conflict. So in that, when we're saying that, hey, I don't like conflict, I understand that. But if you go back to the model, certain ways, the way you're showing up, and you may want to avoid conflict, that may be pat yourself on the back. That's a good conflict resolution model, of way of handling conflict. But it may not be the best way all the time. So much of this too is just asking yourself if you're aware, and I'm glad that everybody put that out there, that you're aware of how you handle conflict. And there are some people who compete in conflict, but I want them to be aware of, do you treat everything like a competition? Do you just got to win?
Yeah.
And that could be adding unnecessary conflict. When you can step back and say, oh, is it better for me to let this go because it's better for the relationship? Or also, what I'm always reminding some leaders who want to win. I was just talking to someone, a public sector leader this morning, and what they found about themselves is that because they wanted to win, always wanted to be right, when they went into this conflict, this pandemic, a lot of their employees weren't developed to do what needed to be done, because they just had hit a point like, hey, no matter what I say, they're going to want their way. So they just sat around a lot and just let this person make the decision. And so now when all this pandemic happened and so many things were moving so fast, because this person was always competing, it never grew anybody else. Now, there's a different way if you're competing to make people better. But if you're just competing just to win.
Because everything every interaction, you have one style, is what I'm hearing, then it's going to produce an outcome that can't be collaborative, at least not naturally.
Exactly. So part of that is understanding too, is that conflict is required to grow people.
Yeah.
It's to help to stretch people, but it's got to be in the right way. Competing is a great thing when it's done the right way.
Would you mind go back to that graph with the relationship and then assertiveness versus relationship?
Okay.
Oh, we have a few minutes if you're up for it.
I am definitely up for it.
Oh, okay, good. Because I want to brainstorm. I want to hear your take on there it is, right there. So we're looking at high assertiveness and high relationship is collaboration.
Yes.
High relationship, low assertiveness is accommodating. So what I've heard in some takeaways, and I'm going to get to my question, is that there is a place and a position for using every single one of these intentional conflict styles.
Yes.
What's interesting is most of us don't consider accommodating a conflict style. And yet what you've shared with us means if you're intentional, it's absolutely a style through any conflict.
Yes.
Okay.
And I like saying, we saw that when businesses had to shelter and all that stuff, there was a lot of conflict there. So what we did is we started realizing, in this season, it's not so much about getting the work done. We got to protect our employees. So we were accommodating and going, hey, wait a minute, the schools are closed, the child care facilities are closed. We have to accommodate this.
Yeah.
And we have to be aware of that because that's what's needed. And so as leaders, we're being intentional. We were intentional about that. And now you'll find that a lot of local leaders, especially in communities, I've been keeping up what's going on in Houston, and you'll see your mayors, and you'll hear a lot of mayors say this, and the Mayor's Council have been saying this, that, hey, we don't have time to play politics.
Yeah.
Because a mayor is more worried about keeping the water on and keeping the lights on and keeping totally different than what you may see at a national level. So then that they're being a little bit more accommodating, and then now they're going, okay, what's the best thing? What's needed here? So they're and you'll see that even what I'm finding too is that when I work a lot in the public sector, and I'm finding in the public sector that agencies before that weren't very collaborative are very collaborative now. Human service agencies and fire and police agencies are working so much collaboratively. And notice when we go into a pandemic or an emergency like this, everybody kind of gets a little bit more collaborative.
Ideally, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we learned in yesterday's talk with Heidi Partita, she is a SVP at Guidance Residential, was the aspect of what do you do when you've got workers who are not able to do their work during the normal hours because now they've got their 4 toddlers, their toddlers, their sister's toddlers, whatever, running around. And I asked her what they told their managers to do in order to manage that. And the answer was be accommodating. It was, as long as the work gets done, our role right now is to understand that everything is different. And this is not about, you need to get it done by 5. I don't care that you have children. It is, what can we do to support you? And just get the work done. We're okay with it as long as you can be productive.
And what I find it now is what I'm finding is a lot of leaders are now, even because they're looking at it being accommodating, but now they're stopping and seeing it in a collaborative way because it's a win-win. Because now what they've realized is that the idea of work being 9 to 5, if they shift and go, hey, if we accommodate, we may now be able to get a 24-hour work model and be more productive.
Woo!
Because you have different people who can do the work, say who may do their work early in the morning, then some who may do work in the afternoon, and then some. But what happens now, they're looking at it going, hey, we have this where we may be able, because now, especially if you're a global organization, you go, wait a minute, this is, if I can look at this as a different way and I'm accommodating to people's needs, as long as they're productive.
Yeah, that was the key. So we have Lori asked if we're going to share the recording, and Lori, absolutely. Usually by this afternoon, the replay and recording will be up. So, but I want you to hear this, Ray. She says, this is one of the best presentations I have seen on conflict.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
I would love to talk to gain some more understanding too of perhaps some examples in each of these quadrants. So, and I'm glad you took it down. So let's take this avoiding one, for example. The one that came to mind for me is just on my mind because I saw a newscast last night, and part of it was there's some outcry in Arizona because they're not releasing the data related to nursing home and elder care tests and deaths. And so the people are taking it to the Arizona Supreme Court. we deserve to know this. This is our family. What's going on there? And you know, in one way, I find that is completely uncompromising, and you know, I have my own judgment about it. But there's something you mentioned. There's always a reason for a person to choose, right? Whether they're choosing competition, choosing avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are faced with a leader who is choosing avoiding, how does the other person navigate around the wheel to move or influence the situation?
Well, I want you to think about the question I was asking, what do you want? And notice in that, it's what do you want for you? What do you want for the other person? What do I want for the relationship? Now, how do I need to behave to get what I want? And sometimes if you have someone who's constantly avoiding, you may have to go around them because they may not be giving you what you need. And you start off saying that Arizona model, but notice because it wasn't a very collaborative and transparency there, the only recourse people had was to take it to court.
To go around.
To go around. So in that you may have that, and so you may have people who are avoiding and all that stuff, but now you have to stop. If it's preventing you from doing what you need to do, now you have to say, I may have to shift to a competing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, then we think in terms of some of these, all, you know, the black and white way that our brain works, either bad or good, but it's not, as you were mentioning. There are times when, repeat for me something you said in the avoidance quadrant was about, there's times when that is the perfect thing to do.
Yes, and in that, I sent you another email that has this and handout. So if you want to go into the Zoom, go into it, and then if you look on the right, it'll allow you just to load up that PDF.
Oh, I can do that. We can talk about that.
Yeah, and then and it'll say you can download and you can download, actually add a handout, and you can just give them that, and it'll have the the 5 model handling models, and also it'll have a sheet that has all the definitions on it.
And are you saying I can do that right now inside our little conversation? All right, we're going to see. And while we're doing that, can you share with us top right, collaboration, middle, compromising? Talk to us about when I want to understand the difference between collaboration and compromising. And then can you share with us some examples of when someone may intentionally choose compromise versus collaboration?
Sure. I want you to think about maybe splitting the difference.
Okay.
Time we compromise, say from an HR platform, we may compromise when we're talking in salary negotiations. Somebody comes in and you compromise all the time. From a business perspective, we go in and say, this is what we're offering. And some say, we can't pay this, we offer this. And then what we do is we find a compromise. Well, they may give a little bit more and we take a little less, or we give a little bit more and they take a little less. That's compromising. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we know for the health, but it helps us also get to collaboration.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about it helps us get to collaboration, because sometimes it ends at the compromise, right?
Well, sometimes it does, but if we're talking long-term relationships, there are times that we compromise, but we're looking at, okay, I can compromise here because for the long run, for the relationship, and also for our outcome of what we're doing in a community, it helps us get there. And sometimes we can't get to collaboration right away because it takes a long time.
Yes.
And so in that, there may be some compromises that help us build to where we're both getting what we want.
Okay, now I'm tracking with you. So that's a piece I'd like for you to expand upon.
Okay.
That relationship piece. We don't always have high trust in a relationship, at least not in the beginning. In fact, I can even take away the word always. Most often, we may not have high trust in a new relationship. And alternatively, we may have low trust in a long-term relationship. What is the process when let's say you go to work and every day you're going to have a conflict or just a different style, different values with someone you're working with on a regular basis? What do I do to correct that?
Okay, first I would ask yourself is what story are you telling yourself about that person?
I don't like that. No, just kidding.
Uh,
Yeah, it's a story.
it's a story.
We don't get along. He doesn't share my values.
And so I want you to think about that. So is it they don't share your value, or they just don't share the same opinion about something you do, of how they see the world? So in that, is this so here's what we do is sometime in conflict, we make it personal.
Okay.
When actually it's just a different ideology, not understanding that people see the world differently than we do. And what we do is we tend to keep speaking from our point of view instead of taking in and looking at their perspective, and start asking yourself, what would make them think that way? What are they seeing that I do not see? Are they coming from fear? Are they coming from this? So how can so they're seeing the threat and I'm seeing the threat, but how can I stop and not see them as the threat, but see working through the reward? What are the rewards that I'm trying to get out of this? And have I shared that with them? But also, have I shared with them what my hope is for them and what my hope is for our relationship?
So sharing your motive, your intention, yes. What the outcome is that you're really wanting from a deeper dialogue about even something that is challenged.
Yes. So part of that too is, but also mastering, we kind of have to master our stories. And I want you to think about if there's, we always have, and I can't say we all, but I know there are some people in my life that when I think about them, I go, oh, and when I see them coming down the hall, it's like, oh my God, here they come again. But what I found is I had to stop, because what's happening is I'm basing my idea on an interaction I had with them before. So I have to disconnect from that so that I can always show up fresh, where I'm willing to listen to understand instead of just reacting or responding. So now I'm
to understand,
other than
to listen to respond.
Yes.
Or just, yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm tracking with you.
So part of that is what we're trying to do is we're trying to change someone else, and we have no power over that. So most of the time, if you notice, the conflict model was about the things you do
that you can control.
Yeah. So
your own emotional well-being and your own your own choice with navigating around the different styles.
And if you notice in a conflict between two people, in the words of the prophet DJ Easy Rock, it takes two to make a thing go right.
I knew it. It takes two to make a thing go right. I am with you.
So that's part of that, and I'll just share this with you, a very great quote that makes you understand the collaboration was when Gorbachev years ago was going to meet Reagan, and that's when Russia and America were really at odds. And when they walked into the summit, he shook Reagan's hand and he looked at him and said to them, "Today I come to deny you of an enemy."
Which one said that?
Gorbachev said that to Reagan. "Today I come to deny you of an enemy."
Wow.
Yes. So in that, he had to prepare his mindset to look for the long term, if we could get this healthy relationship going. And yeah, there's things in the past, yes, and there's some things we got to work out, and there's a difference in ideology, political, there's a lot of stuff that we got here. But if we can start finding some common ground, we could possibly deny ourselves of some enemies and move forward. But it takes us first to stop and say, okay, can I disconnect from my story? But notice, I'm not allowing them to overrun me. I still got my boundaries. I still have my values. And you had mentioned something that you said they don't espouse my values. Yeah. But I want you to be thinking about it. If we're in an organization, we're not about our values. We're about the organization's values.
Okay.
So that's the thing we have to weigh. We're making it personal. We're bringing our own values in instead of, I have to ask the question, what organization core value have they violated?
Well, and something you're saying here applies to obviously our personal, professional, all around, and that is, and it ties back to Dr. Mark Freeman also did a presentation on conflict last week or the week before, And he used the model that I know you've heard of, E plus R equals O,
Yes.
event plus the response equals our outcome. And what you're sharing with us is that response is the important piece of the equation that produces the outcome.
Right.
And removing our personal story from it means we can maneuver any way we want.
Yes.
Okay.
And so in that, I want you to think about in conflict too, is that what we tend to do is we think that, hey, just because we change, automatically they're going to change differently. But understand, they got a story about you too.
Yeah, of course.
And they got to go through too.
What?
What? But I'm perfect, not
right?
me.
Talking about.
They got a story, but also all of us too's got not only the story between us, we got the stories also from our experiences. We got life stories.
We got a lot of stories to wipe clean.
We got a lot of stories that we're playing through, because that's where, remember I was telling you that we never respond to what we see or hear. We respond to the stories we tell ourselves.
Okay, that's a takeaway.
Yeah.
We've got time maybe for one more question. I wasn't able to figure out where to get the PDF. So I did, folks, upload it to Google Drive. And for those of you who are listening to the recording, we will put it in our Hey Summit portal along with the deck so that you guys can have the deck, the recording, and Ray's handout, and make sure you know how to get a hold of Ray. Real quick, two things. I want to make sure people know how to get a hold of you. And Bettina says, what if the person is not following the company's value, but have their own personal agenda?
So that's the thing, that's the question. Now you got to ask yourself, that's a whole different thing. That now it becomes competing, because notice they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So that's when you hold them accountable and you draw a line in the sand. And I'm going to just say this to you, because sometimes what we're doing is we don't realize the reason that employee keeps doing it is because we keep responding the same way. And what happens a lot of times is that we want to treat everybody like they're acting wise. And notice I'm not saying they're not wise, I'm just saying that they're acting wise. So is their behavior wise? You'll know somebody's wise behavior when they're following the rules, they're following the policies, they're doing what needs to be done. And you also know they're wise when you correct them. They'll, maybe the same moment or days later go, hey, I really appreciate that. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. And so that's about 70–80% of the people that you're probably going to work with. And you'll tell them something, they correct it, it's no problem. But then there may be about 10 to 15% of the people you work with who behavior is, how can I put it?
Disruptive?
Kind of disruptive, foolish.
Foolish. Okay. I know some of those.
Yeah, and
they've done one once or twice.
And this is a foolish person's behavior, is that when you correct them, they never take responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault. It's always they did this, they did that. Well, why are you picking up? That tends to be foolish behavior. And what we tend to do is we treat foolish people like they're wise. We're trying to treat them like they're wise, when we have to treat them like is we have to hold them accountable. So if you don't hold them accountable, they never change. And notice what this person just asked about is this person's violating policies. So who's holding this person accountable?
Yeah.
That's competing. You have to now hold them accountable.
Bettina wrote, abysmal, nuts, cray. We are right there with you. So I want to make sure folks know how to get a hold of you. It's rweaver@abogecoaching.com, and that's ABOGE coaching.com. And Ray's direct line, 707-410-8278. So as always, it's just a pleasure to hang out with you, my friend.
Oh, I just so enjoyed it, and I thank you. And I want everybody to continue to be safe, be healthy, and stay strong. Thank you so much. Y'all have a good day now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Everyone stay safe and healthy. Okay. Take care.